Welcome to NewYorkBIO's Virtual Breakfast Series, a digital program started in 2020 featuring fireside chats with leaders from across the healthcare spectrum. This week's episode features two dynamic leaders of early stage life science companies in New York City, Maria Pineda, co-founder and CEO of Envisagenics, and Melanie Goldey, the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer of Tomorrow.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Hawks Bland, and I am the CEO at NewYorkBIO. We're thrilled you've joined us for another installation of our virtual breakfast series. Today, we have two amazing guests that are in leadership positions for New York City-based. I don't even think you can either be called startups anymore. You're earlier stage companies, right? Like I think the moniker startup just goes out the window with your two companies. We really appreciate your being here today. For the audience, as usual, if you have questions for either Melanie or Maria, just put them in the Q&A or the chat, and Derek and I will get to them as we have our discussion. Thank you specifically to our partners at Goodwin. They have been an amazing partner throughout this process and sponsoring our breakfast to bring you guests like we have today. With that, I'll turn it over to Derek, and he can introduce Melanie and Maria, and then we'll get started. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Well, both of you, good morning, and it's great to have both of you here. Your companies are both fantastic. Maria, of course, we've known each other since you started Envisagenics, and I've been lucky enough to know at least most of that story. And Melanie, we were fortunate enough to have you present tomorrow at our New York Stock Exchange event in December. So we're actually thrilled to have both to be here. So one of the things we usually tend to do here is kick off with, I'll call it a bit of an origin story for everybody in the audience. And Maria, would you like to go? First? Talk a little bit about how you came out of academia, where Envisagenics came from, and really how you got to where you are.
Sure. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Derek, Melanie. It's a pleasure. Hope everybody's having fun. And again, a little bit about me. Before I started Envisagenics, I'm originally from Colombia. Came to the United States for school in Miami, went to a university down at Barry University. And that's when I kind of fell in love with research. Right on my university, I became a Goldey fellow there and an NIH and NSF fellow. And I realized this country was giving a lot of money for research, and for kids that were really interested in doing really good science, started presenting in several conferences and getting awards and money. My first card was actually bought by money I got at the science fair and at a conference. And I was like, whoa, you can get money to not only go to school and do research, but you get money for yourself. That's crazy. This country's awesome. So that was like my first, kind of like, you can do good and have fun and get money and kind of continue building what you like. And I, being at Barry kind of taught me how to get fellowships, endowments, do great research, presented well, because I realized that all this money was coming from somewhere. And that somewhere meant my mom, my grandma, my friends. So all the taxpayers are putting in all that money. And if I wasn't able to tell them what my science was, then what was the point? So like I worked really, really a lot to try to tell them and my mom exactly what I was doing. And I was doing very early work in genetics in Drosophila and fruit flies. And I had to tell my grandma what genetics was and what we wanted to do and what we wanted to study. And we're studying small RNAs and jumping genes and things that there was no genome back then. And I was trying to make a point to understand how to do everything. And from there, after presenting and I went to Stanford for undergrad research programs, and then University of Florida, and got accepted to several institutions, actually around 12, because my fellowship mandate me to have 10 applications for a minority to go into grad school and have higher minority rates of acceptances and applications in different universities. So after having, several institutions giving me one, I got a call from Adrian Craner after interviewing a Coast from Harbor lab. And he was the one, in Spanish that convinced me to go to Cold Spring Harbor. And I said, well, I'm engaged. I have a fiance, now my husband. And, you know, it's like kind of like our decision. So Cold Spring Harbor's like, really? Oh, sure. So they invited both of us again, and him to go and tour Cold Spring Harbor and talk to even Jim Watson and everybody there and all the professors and the science. I've only read them in books. So becoming a Cold Spring Harbor fellow or Watson School fellow became like a big deal for me and my family. And I graduated. I did my PhD there. And while I was graduating, I realized that, you know, I was very good at doing research, but I was even better at getting money to go to school and do research. So I was like, oh, these money thing. I wonder what else I could do with it. And I ended up doing a 1-year fellowship with OSI Pharmaceutical, which was a Long Island biotech that's spin out of Cold Spring Harbor and was in Long Island. And I ended up working with Graham Griffith there as a mentor under Cullen. And Cullen was a scientist. And, you know, he was telling me, he said, look, you know, a startup, you can, you know, spin it out, do the science, you know, get revenue, get investment. And I'm like, how does that work? He's like, you can do partnership with BD. And I'm like, I don't understand what business development even means. He's like, well, don't you join my BD team as the intern for the year and figure it out? So I did that for a year.
So this is Colin Goddard. So Colin Goddard, the CEO of OSI, basically asked you to join their BD team?
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Yes, and you know, I think that was awesome to like see a scientist being a CEO, and like, what can you do with a PhD? That was my premise, and that's one of the reasons, you know, we started. I think that's when I met Derek. Also, a program at Cold Spring Harbor. We would invite people that had PhDs and could teach us PhDs and postdocs. Started this group with a couple of postdocs that what can you do with a PhD other than being a professor. So then we and other postdocs in New York City also had a similar program. And that's where I met most of the other biotech CEOs in New York City, because most of us were postdocs or were interested in entrepreneurship or were interested in doing something different. And from there, I ended up going to VC for a year until my co-founder and Adrian called me saying, hey, remember what we were working on? Patients, which are kids with spinal muscular atrophy, can work, are sending Adrian handing thank you notes after they couldn't even move a single muscle. So I didn't even need to see this data after they showed me the thank you notes from the kids. And we put a name on it. I helped him. I was on the VC side, so I helped him. I put a pitch, and he pitched for my bosses, and I was sitting in the other side. And afterwards, they're like, if you like it, we'll give you a pre-seed for you to, you know, go and be the CEO of it if Martine, my co-founder, accepts. And that's how we started Envisagenics very early on, almost 8 years ago. So we could do it again, but other indications. And this time automatic with AI and machine learning and cloud computing, because both of them were starting. And I decided to start a company that everybody thought it was kind of crazy, but I really believed in it. So I started it.
Right. That's fantastic. And just to kind of fill in, so basically Envisagenics uses RNA-based therapeutics to combat splicing mutations, correct?
Correct. Yes, we synthesize RNA therapeutics to modulate or fix splicing errors that are present in patients. So we analyze right now we could do 1,000 patients analysis of full transcriptome, the whole genome, in under 2 hours, which we used to take months to do one. Now we can take 1,000 patients in under 2 hours. And by doing that, this automated process and so much data, we can identify prevalence or targets that are present in thousands of patients and not in normal tissue. So we want to design, you know, the right therapeutics for the right patient population, because they haven't been subtyped or grouped in maybe 10 or 20 years. So we want to change that, and we want to design and change the way that early R&D is being done by accelerating the early process of identifying the target, understanding the mechanism of action the biology behind it, and understand which patients will benefit from it early on. So when you're doing clinical trials, we will have a companion diagnostic and understand anything that has to do with that target and the therapeutic. So yeah, I'm excited.
Here we go. All right, so
Oh,
Melanie, we're going to switch gears a little bit because you have you took a slightly different road, right? Although one I would say is equally exciting. So between their finance, you went to healthcare, you went to digital media, and then back into healthcare again with Tomorrow's. Do you want to give us a little bit of the story about how you got to Tomorrow, because this is exciting as well?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you, Derek and Jennifer, for having me, and for Goodwin for sponsoring this. And Maria, I love your story. I think it's so fantastic how you just the twists and turns and how you've come to where you are now. It's really inspiring. So,
Thanks,
yeah,
Melanie.
I definitely took a sort of a different route. So I grew up on the West Coast, and my parents immigrated from Asia when they were in their 20s. So neither of them went to college, and they came and did not know any English and had to basically start from scratch. And my father was one of the biggest reasons why I eventually went into tech. So he came here and he's from Taiwan, and he, again, didn't know how to do anything really. And he started importing light boxes. Do you remember those? For, photographers, and back when we used film. So he was doing that, and he actually really didn't like it. He just didn't like the travel. He didn't like, just the nature of that work. And so in his spare time, he taught himself how to code. And so he created this point of sale software solution for small businesses, and he, sold that up and down the West Coast, and that's how he made a living. And so I remember him just being super passionate about technology. I remember as a child having this weird affinity for technology and seeing in my living room, how quickly the computer models that my dad had were changing. And of course, I was a kid, I couldn't really articulate this at the time, but later in life, as I was thinking about a career and kind of what I wanted to lean into, I remembered those days and I said, hey, that's pretty cool. And I actually went to school for economics and found that I had an interest in just quantitative analysis, numbers, data. So I went into finance in banking, and they asked me when I, was recruited, they said, well, which industry group would you like to go to? Rank your top 3. Mm-hmm. And so I put, please put me in the tech group. I begged them to do that. And they did. They said, okay, great. So I was at JP Morgan at the time, and they had their technology team out in San Francisco. So I got to move out there. And that was such a great experience. Just the training and the development there. The company was awesome. I was, sort of exploring San Francisco, and I really got a chance to be in Silicon Valley during some of the most exciting years of just new companies popping up. And I started my sort of analyst life in banking covering software and semiconductor companies, which is interesting. And just if you hold that thought, I'll come back to it, because it's interesting how at Tomorrow, it is a software company with RFID technology. So I've kind of come full circle, but that was really great. After a few years in banking, though, I realized that I think I saw these startups coming out. I saw companies and founders harnessing the power of the internet, data, technology to really disrupt analog industries to make lives better, simply put, right? And I thought that was super exciting. So I wanted to go to the company side, and so I left banking, and I found this company called Everyday Health, which was, a fantastic company, a fantastic leadership team. And I thought, hey, this is actually pretty interesting. And the mission there was pretty simple. It was just to use technology and the internet to connect patient communities or caretakers with healthcare professionals. And so there was a lot of, it was obviously more sophisticated than that, but that was the premise. And I said, hey, this is really interesting, and I would love to be a part of that. So I went there, and it was about 50 people at the time. So startup, early stage, and stayed there for about 9 years, helped to grow that company through a series of M&A transactions. We took the company public, and then opportunistically ended up selling the company. So kind of saw the whole ride there. And,
Mhm.
you know, I think what was interesting there was just, you know, growing as a person and professionally as well, but really understanding that I loved being in healthcare. And I loved the collision of sort of digital health and the traditional healthcare industry. And a lot of stuff was
Mhm.
happening in the world at the time that made that, it made, you know, sort of where we sat at the nexus of all of those trends. But I think, you know, after the sale, I thought, hey, you know, maybe I'll try something new, and ended up taking a turn into digital media, which Derek mentioned,
Mhm.
and went to Refinery 29, where I was their CFO for 3 years, and helped to diversify their business, expanded internationally, had a lot of fun there. And again, that was a mission-oriented company, which was really compelling to me, helping to elevate the voices of women and other marginalized communities. And so that was a common theme was, hey, you know, wherever I go, I would love to work for fantastic founders and entrepreneurs, but really at a company with a mission that, you know, that really resonated with me. Ended up selling that company as well. So apparently I like to do that. And took a turn back into healthcare. And so I'm at Tomorrow Life Sciences now, which is a fertility technology company based in New York. We have essentially created the world's first automated solution for fertility clinics, specifically as it relates to the long-term care and storage of the frozen eggs and embryos that will eventually be used in IVF. Currently, all of those processes and the storage system that IVF clinics use globally is manual. It hasn't really innovated in the last, you know, 4 or 5 decades that IVF has been used in humans. And so this really is innovative and something new. And again, I think kind of back to how I was raised is just this thesis of, you know, technology will just disrupt really everything.
Yeah.
And what better way to do that than to help make IVF safer and more reliable for patients and clinicians. So that's where I am now.
No, that's fantastic. So we had David Sable on the Breakfast series a few months ago, and we talked a little bit about this opportunity. And you know, a lot of people don't necessarily know this, but honestly, the technology that we've been using for IVF is, you know, barely marked test tubes in random beakers of frozen things in places. It was kind of screaming for a revolution here. And before we move on, I just want to make sure that we mention this. So when you did the Refinery 29 transaction, that created the largest digital media company in the world, right? At the time? Yeah. So I figured, I thought we would get that on the scoreboard just so.
Just being humble. Okay. She's like, yes.
Thanks, Derek.
No problem. We write down the numbers, and every once in a while we can put everything in perspective with those things. So
we can not be humble. We can shout both of your accomplishments out, right?
Just remember, when we talk to additional people about how we do this program, and we lean on how terrific our guests are, every once in a while it's nice to lean on statistics like, yes, this person created the largest digital media company in the world. So
so impressive, Melanie, by the way. Take off my hat.
Thank you.
You have to tell me how you did it.
So when you look back, kind of what are some of can either of you look back and think of like one or two of kind of, you know, crystal stepping stones where you look back and say, yeah, that was one of the things that was a real turning point for either a piece of clarity or understanding where you wanted to go with things, or just where things kind of started to fall into place for what kind of vision you had for the rest of your career? Maria, you can go first.
Okay, Derek, give me a little more context. So something that made me like kind of aha moment, or
so yeah, a little bit. Like you look at your journey in building Envisagenics, and I can imagine that in the beginning you have a lot of things being thrown at you that are new and are different, and you know, what were some of the things that kind of made, you know, the puzzle pieces fit together a little more squarely?
Yeah, okay, so I think one of the biggest moments for the company when and Derek remembers this is I met Tom Brennan at one of the New York City Tech Connect symposiums, and he was starting the life science ecosystem in New York City, which I think he still didn't really know what that meant. and I don't know if we still do, but Tom Brennan was telling me a little bit about his venture capital group with Bob Nelson, and I said, wow, that sounds really big. And my company, I mean, we're just starting. And he said, well, if you're just starting, I have the best group of women that I think like moonshot ideas. And I said, moonshot ideas, what is that? I'm a scientist. What does that really mean? And he's like, Silicon Valley moonshot ideas or startups. And I'm like, no, I have no idea what you mean. And he goes, you know who Peter Thiel is? And I said, no, I have no idea who he is. So then, he said, well, regardless of who he is, he just got some of the 3 best women that he can for his foundation, and they started Breakout Lab. And then I said, tell me a little bit more. He said, well, they got Hemi Parsatomi out of Nature, and she used to have 400 reviewers, and they, having a scientific director with, Julia and Lindy in the business front, have created this group of great scientific, startups that are really, like deep tech, like yours. And when I started pitching to life science investors, I was pitching, like a machine learning, AI, cloud computing, target drug discovery. And they were like, what? You're a software company? I said, I am. And that's when I said, okay, so maybe the Silicon Valley folks will understand what I'm building. So when we presented to the breakout labs, and they preceded us, so we were part of, I think we're company number 28, 29, and that was a great moment because we were part of this deep tech. We got reviewed scientifically, and we were preceded by them, and our classmates at breakout labs are like Cortexime, right? Like companies that are done amazing work by women, by other minorities, and by, most importantly, all of us are scientists. So we got his network and their network, and that opened up a lot of doors for Envisagenics and for me as a founder. And having, somebody like him in a group managed by 3 women was amazing, because I didn't know that could happen. And that opened up a lot of doors. Then Dolby Family Ventures came in, and then I raised our seed round with Shauna Fisher and Dynamic, and New York State came in as well. So it was, it kind of opened up a lot of doors for Envisagenics. So I think that was one of the earliest moments for us that made a big difference.
That's awesome, and they're a great group. They're really strong. They fund a lot of awesome stuff. So Melanie, over to you.
Crazy. I think moonshot means crazy. And there's no industry, there's nothing that other people, when they're like, what are your comps? And you're like, there was no industry, so how can I comp something like this if I'm doing something so innovative for new technology? Now it's, cloud computing has been doing amazing, and sequencing, and it's now like $700 per patient. So
finding the right people that understand what the vision is and understand kind of how it plugs into kind of the greater innovation ecosystem and where things could go is so crucial, right? There's the famous story of how they got Stefan Bancel to be CEO of Moderna. Nubar wrote down what Moderna was going to do on a napkin, and he showed it to him, and Stefan goes, that's not going to work. And Nubar goes, I'm not going to argue that. He goes, but think about what it would mean if it did. Right. And Stefan like sheepishly goes, yeah, he got me. That's how he got me to go. So Melanie, over to you. So what are kind of some of the big things where, kind of the puzzle pieces, fell into place, and you either, saw what you could do differently or kind of saw where things could go?
Yeah, I think, well, one of the big moments was, of course, the story that I mentioned about my father. I think he's just, been a total influence on me. And I always felt like I had this entrepreneurial bug. And while I haven't personally started a company, I feel very compelled by people who have, and, their visions, and people who can connect to the stars. And, so I've always wanted to kind of attach myself to people like that, so that I could, again, help them to build companies and scale them. But it's exciting for me. And I think, one of the things Maria said, a lot of what Maria said has never been done before. And I love that, innovative, the innovation that's coming out of a lot of the biotech and technology companies now is really just forging the path for others. And that can be very scary, but that can also be really exciting. And so part of the reason why one of the most exciting reasons why I came to Tomorrow was just that, that the founders here have an incredible vision and are really forging the path for, a safer and more reliable method of storage for what really plagues a lot of people, which is infertility and helping to have safer IVF processes. So one of the other personal sort of aha moments was, for me, was becoming a mom. So I have a little guy at home, he's 4. And I was at Everyday Health at the time, and I, was on my leave and getting ready to go back to work. And I was pretty anxious about it. I said, I don't know what to do. How do I go back? And the company had grown. Like I said, I started when it was 50 people. The company was now sort of 700 people. It was public, it was different. And I was really nervous about going back. And I think I stayed in touch with my bosses, and I was sort of talking to my CEO about this. And I said, hey, I think we can make it better here. I think we can make this culture better for people coming back to work from leave, because if I'm feeling this way, other people probably are too. And I had some ideas, and he was so funny. My CEO at the time, he's like, you seem to have a lot of ideas about this. I said, yeah. And he goes, so, when you come back from leave, like, why don't you take over and make it happen? So you're going to run HR when you come back. And I started laughing, and I'm like, well, that's not exactly what I was saying, but, okay. And I said, I'm a, financially trained person, I'm not a HR person. And he laughed and he said, yeah, but you'll figure it out. And it actually could be really interesting. And you can sort of flip traditional HR on its head and bring, some strategy and some new ideas. And I said, okay, so I'll try it out. And I think what's interesting at that point was I kind of realized that as much as I loved finance and corporate development and doing these, staying on that side of the organization, I also realized that I liked the people side. I liked culture and building culture and being part of that, and how it all really does connect, with each other. It's not, people and culture is not a separate thing, right? I think it if you have great people and culture in your company, that makes the hopefully the financial performance, better. So it's all interconnected. And I think I just had this moment where I was like, oh, that's really interesting and cool. And so I kind of, in my own sort of career decisions, really had a mental shift at that point of like, hey, I think I want to be more operational. I think I want to expand my skills and do other things. And, hopefully one day I can start a business or, have my own business, and that would be really interesting. But I think that was a special moment for me.
Yeah. So what did Tomorrow look like when you joined? I think it was right around the Series B, right? So what did the company look like then, and what is the company going to look like a year from now?
Oh, so I joined in December of 2019, right around the Series B. We were about 35 people at the time. We have a 5,000 square foot office in Manhattan. And now, about a little over a year later, we are about 75 people. So we've grown significantly, and we're really grateful that we've been able to do so during the pandemic, and we found just such amazing people to bring to the company. But what's interesting is that, when I joined, our product, which is a hardware software integrated cryo robot, is actually the name of it. It was still in development, and we were still doing a lot of testing, and we were pre-revenue, and so it was very exciting, but it was still very early. And I'm really happy to say that as of January, we've officially launched. We're live in 3 fertility clinics in the country.
Congratulations!
Yeah, so thank you. That's very exciting, and we have additional clinics in our pipeline that we'll be onboarding in the coming months. But to just kind of look back and think about the progress that was made in the last 12 to 14 months is pretty exciting and pretty awesome. And I think a year from now, we will, continue to roll out our technology into additional U.S. clinics. We have international aspirations. So here's a fun fact, since we like numbers, right? So of the global sort of IVF volume, so the number of IVF cycles, the US only represents 9%.
Really?
Which,
Wow.
when
Really?
so I was shocked when I learned that. And so it's only 9%. The UK and Europe combined are about 27% of IVF volume. Japan is 20%. China, not surprisingly, is also extremely high 30% range. So, and all the clinics everywhere are using this manual system of storage, which is, totally risky and not sustainable. Meanwhile, another fun fact, 1 in 8 people require some sort of assistance from a doctor to have a child. So that's very prevalent. That number is very big. And so I think what's exciting about tomorrow is that we really do have a global opportunity to help patients and clinicians everywhere. And so in a year, to get back to your question, I think you'll see us in multiple different countries and continue to bring our technology to people around the world.
How did COVID impact your process of your testing and getting clinics on board?
I was thinking about this yesterday, actually. First of all, as leaders in any company, who would have thought we would have to totally pivot and start, thinking about like COVID safety protocols and what are we going to do? And so I feel like leadership teams everywhere deserve, applause because it's really kind of crazy that everyone was trying to figure it out. At tomorrow, I think we did a pretty good job, I think, of pivoting. The product and technology teams here are fantastic. They were super thoughtful and had lined up, a couple of different vendors on the supply chain side so that we had some options. And that was just us sort of being, sort of for our own planning purposes, not for COVID, but we were so thankful that we had done that. Yeah. We raised some additional money. So I know that, nobody knew what was going to happen. And so it was in May of last year that we raised a small round just to, make sure that we could continue developing the product and investing in it. So that was excellent. And then we, just kind of figured out like, how do we maintain communication with our team? How do we make sure we have a physical product. And so we needed product and tech people to be in the office to test and to do work. And so we figured out a way to keep the office open, to have, 5 or 6 people in at a time, only the people who needed to be here. Thankfully, we also were able to secure COVID tests for the team. So we've been testing weekly, in some cases twice a week for those people who are going in and out or traveling. Yeah. Yep. And then we just had a really honest and open conversation with the clinics. And interestingly, many of them did not close their doors. I don't know if folks on the phone know this, but IVF procedures have typically been carved out. At the beginning of COVID, there was a big debate about whether it was essential or not. And my opinion is that, if you're a patient going through an IVF cycle, you can't just stop, for COVID, you can't just stop it. Right. And, if you were thinking about doing it, that's a big issue to not be able to do that. And I don't think it's an elective procedure. So anyway, so the clinics, wanted to stay open, and we basically figured out a way that we could work after hours on the weekends so that we could continue working with the clinics and still, of course, being safe. We are walking into a medical facility, so we, wanted to be very thoughtful about not exposing any of our partners to anything, as well as our team. So that's just some of the stuff that we did. But I have to say that the team was so amazing and incredible. And just, I think it actually, instead of being a hindrance to the company, I think COVID actually was a rallying cry for our company. And everyone's like, we're going to get through this. And our clinic partners were very appreciative that we could be there with them. Yeah,
that's excellent. So Maria, how has Envisagenics handled everything over the last year? Because you're trying to advance things towards the clinic.
Right. So first, I think we always thought that because we're innovators, we had to be right next to each other. So ideas will happen like
Right.
organically by having like interdisciplinary scientists right next to each other. So chemists, biologists, data scientists, bioinformaticians, engineers, and the business folks, and by having everybody kind of in an open space right next to each other, things organically will happen. We help each other. We turn around like, oh no, this is what it means. But actually, I sent everybody home at the end of February, and everybody was like, no, it's not gonna happen. Nothing's gonna happen. And I said, everybody pack up and go. And most of them had 2 screens, and they're like, no, we'll come back for the screens. It's okay. And they were not allowed back in the building in New York City. So we had to, figure it out. But thankfully, because we have, built a company that is like digital, and everything is cloud-based, right? So we could work all from home. And we had our Johnson & Johnson partnership, which was announced also, last year in May, in April, May. And we were able to deliver everything because everything was cloud-based. So all these biotech companies like mine, where we do have wet lab to validate everything that comes out of computationally, but all the everything works computationally, even for the biologists, because the company from the ground up was built as a collaboration tool where everything's in the cloud. We all communicate by by Teams, by Slack, by all the channels. We've done that always. So my team was more productive, and still more productive now than it was before COVID. Maybe we are still scientists, so the 2-hour lunches and talking about science, and sometimes that takes up a little bit of time. Instead at home, I think everybody, and I'm very thankful, where we have a lot of PhDs, we have a lot of like really strong scientists, and because we have this computational mindset, my company has been so productive. And because of that, I think pharma realized that doing science, like computational and clinical trials and communicating and working online and doing Zooms and doing science online was extremely important, because we could still advance science by being at home. And that's something that, being an AI company, it kind of shifted. And I think their mindset in pharma and biopharma started shifting as well because of COVID. So we got a lot of momentum with pharma research and collaborations, and RNA. Also, again, COVID happened, and we do RNA. So one thing, we got a lot of momentum from RNA perspective, because everybody started understanding what RNA is, and both vaccines are RNA. But then our raw materials for our things, because we do non-COVID, are bucked up. So some of the things in my wet lab have taken a little toll, so they're a little bit slower, because COVID has, in grants as well. We do a lot of grants, and a lot of grant money went to COVID. So a lot of the pay lines for the HHS actually went lower. And so you, as Melanie said, you make it. I mean, you persevere, you figure out how to build it. We raised a little bit of money, as you said, with some of the amazing investors to keep us posted. NIH, NCI actually gave us a bridge round for matching funds, because they realized that oncology and CNS were taking a toll for research purposes. So they've been kind of helping us as well. So I think if it wasn't for the industry kind of taking a different lens to everything we do, we wouldn't be where we are. But we're excited. There's a lot of momentum, and we just have to scale and keep up with the demand. So that's an exciting time to be at Envisagenics.
Yeah, I think at the end, I think as we look back, hopefully as we get further away and then we look back, right, we'll realize that there were some silver linings from work productivity, and hopefully, as we've talked to different guests over the last year, I think the next interesting phase will be what stays that was a COVID innovation, and what we go back. Like, I look forward to sitting around the table and talking to people again, right? And being in person.
I mean, going to conferences.
Yeah,
I
exactly. Right.
believe I will say that.
Yes, I know, right? Because yes, I even miss, and those of you who know me will laugh, but I even miss our Bio New Jersey, New York Bio cruise on the Hudson in the summer. And I was loath to get on a boat with people I didn't know for 4 hours.
I'm going to remind you that you said that the
Yes,
next time
I know,
that we're
thank
on a
you,
boat
yes.
circling Manhattan.
But when we can go back to that again. But I think there are some some good things, and I think looking back we'll say, okay, that works, let's keep it. What didn't work so well, let's, and I think in New York particularly, because we have such differing commutes for our workforce, I think it'll be interesting to see when people feel comfortable coming back. And I don't know, Melanie, what all you said you all have grown, so you've doubled in size while everyone's mostly working remotely except for your staff doing the R&D work. What all are you thinking as far as when people will return to your Midtown office?
So we actually have started coming back. We started in September. And again, with all of the protocols I mentioned and the testing going on. So about half of our staff are coming in to the office for some reason. So, and that, was really a necessity for our commercial side of our team who really, again, we have cryogenic technicians that need to come in. We have trainers. We have the people who we have embryologists on staff. And these are the teams that get deployed to help the IVF clinics to move their specimens from the current sort of manual storage tanks into the Tomorrow platform. So, it's been pretty interesting around here. We have like a schedule that people are on, and you have your days that you come in so that we don't go over capacity. So we've been pushing it a little bit in terms of, having a decent number of people coming back. I think that to your point, though, I think that, sort of this, what companies have seen everywhere is that you can work remotely and you can still be productive. Now, you don't get the sort of serendipitous moments in the office when you pass by, and there is magic that happens, particularly with great ideas, brainstorming, and kind of that little sprinkle of pixie dust that you get for, coming up with innovative ideas and products that happens when you have in-person, experiences. So I'm not saying that remote is the way to go, but I think there's some hybrid approach that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And again, just in thinking about the team here, safety, or what is safe, is subjective, right? And I think we have to respect, different people's situations and circumstances and how they feel about coming back to work. But what I do know is that, post-COVID, I think that people's ideas of work and where you work will be forever changed, because we've seen that, we can still do it, and we can still do it effectively.
Yep.
Although I would argue that fourth grade, which occasionally goes on in the other room, is not so effective from home.
No,
We'll bifurcate the.
I've been waiting for my 3-year-old to come into the room. Be like, ta-da! Which happened in last conference. I did.
There's no idea that gets shot down faster than, what if we kept school as remote? Every single parent is like, absolutely not. You're going back. No, fully in person. You're going back. No, that's where those in-person interactions are really, really important, because it means you're not here.
Magic can happen here because they're at school. Okay.
Yes.
That's the hybrid. Yeah.
Okay.
You go to school. I'll stay at home.
Derek, Jennifer, we have a question from Terry Wiley. So I don't know if you want to read it, or I could read it right now.
Yeah, sure. I'll throw it in there.
By the way, hey Terry.
Go for it.
Go
ahead.
Terry asked Maria how you would advise academic and research institutions to encourage and support scientist entrepreneurs, and what advice would you have regarding encouraging and supporting specifically women scientists?
Yeah, that's a great question, Terry. And she asked because she was part of that. She was, the head of Cold Spring Harbor Tech Transfer Office, and she's the one that helped me spin out and commercialize the technology out of the institution. So the first thing I will say is actually go talk to your Terry, or talk to your tech transfer office. But I think it's really important to see us, Melanie and me, that we're able to spin out, out of institutions. Like, it's doable. I think science will not, we've been trained in some of the best institutions around the world. And just because you're private doesn't mean that you're going to change what you are trained to do. So, and you're going to hire, as Melanie was saying, like your culture is extremely important. Your people, you're going to hire some of the best scientists out there and the best people in finance, in business development, in marketing, in sales, in anything you will do the best you can. So you will learn, and if you don't know it, you'll hire those people that can help you, build the company that you want. So I'll say for the entrepreneur scientists that are out there, like, just don't be afraid. You can do the best science you can. You're building your companies like you're building your private lab. And I always tell Martine, my co-founder, it's my job is to get money for him to do great science and build. And the best thing we can do is do it differently, because patients are waiting, and we really can't wait. We have to change the way it's done manually these days, and taking so long and just failing and wasting money. That money could be used for innovators like myself to make a difference and do research that is different and with different approaches, with different chemistry, with different techniques. So we could accelerate things, and instead of taking decades, my premise is we can analyze data and identify a target and go to the clinic in a year, and then in preclinical, and then in 2 years go to a phase 2A. Automate all the process that can be automated, because we should not be an industry where things are old school. We have to embrace innovation. We have to embrace automation, and women know a lot about automating and multitasking and getting things done, period. So I think for women and women scientists that have children, and I think a lot of postdocs have children in their postdoc time, because I don't know, I've heard it's the right time, because you still don't have a lot of responsibility and you still kind of in between. But you shouldn't be afraid to go out there and support and find the support. There's a lot of support from all the women CEOs, and most of us in New York biotech CEOs are women. No, I don't know why. I don't know the statistics, but probably Jennifer and Derek know more than me. But a lot of my friends, we can tell you how it works, how the support. But if you have a good support system, then you can make it. My husband, he got a better job when I did a startup, so we can balance, the salary, like things that like operational, meaning at home, like how are you gonna do it? When I was, and I think Satya and the Microsoft folks love this story, because I closed my Microsoft deal when I was on the epidural, and the legal team kept taking me out. And I was like, stop it. I need to execute this. I cannot do anything. What else am I going to do? Like watch Real Housewives of New Jersey? Like, no, I am finishing this.
Yes.
So I think that is the difference of women leaders. And, it showcases what we can do. I closed my Microsoft investment while I was in the epidural, and I wouldn't have done it otherwise. And then I had 5 days off because I had a C-section, and then I started breastfeeding, and most of my calls will be while I was breastfeeding. So the baby was quiet, perfect timing, So things that I think women don't talk about it enough, and I think Derek has been around a group of women for a long time and has heard this story so many times, and he's always the one man out in New York City. But I think that institutions have to figure out how to support us women in a different way, because we need a lot more support than others. It's reality. Even though, if we're the breadwinner and we're the woman, we have to be supported different ways. Even if they say, okay, you want to build a company, you need, daycare for longer after you leave as a postdoc, we can leave you the daycare, which is cheaper or subsidized here, so you can go and start a startup spin out of the institution, things like that. Then we will have the support. I think support means everybody that will benefit from us commercializing technology out of institutions. Institutions have to realize that women have to be backed better, have to be supported better, and again, have to, like, I think Derek and as we're discussing online, it's like the metrics, the way that they measure how we succeed, how we are doing, ROI, it's very different than men. And if we don't, we still have to be looked at in a different lens, and that's important. But because we are different, but we shouldn't, we're doing our best that can, and it doesn't matter, we're women, we're people of color, which I am, or anything. If you build a good business, you have a lot to offer, and that shouldn't matter if you're a woman or a male, but you have to be supported in different ways. And I think that's where Melanie was going for the HR, perspective as well. You have to kind of have different ways to support women.
Yeah, we actually have a
So-
follow-on question that
Yeah,
fits
go for
in.
it.
Yeah, right here. And the question says, neither of you look like most biotech CEOs, CFOs. Do you think that things are getting better in our industry in terms of gender parity and diversity? Melanie?
Melanie, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that yes. The short answer is yes. I think that recently there's obviously been a big movement by companies big and small for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think it's table stakes at this point, really, for companies to have some sort of effort around recruiting from diverse, pools of talent, thinking, non-traditionally about how to recruit, right? Going to organizations, Girls Who Code is a great example of a place to recruit from for STEM companies. So I think, yes, I think there is, a lot of effort being placed on this topic. I think that it'll take time to see, more women and more people of color in leadership positions. And that just is the natural, sort of process that just takes time to affect change. But I definitely think that it is changing. And I also think that there is, as it relates to women, a whole new wave of female entrepreneurs that have fantastic ideas, and they're getting more attention. And it's not necessarily because they're a woman, but I think that women are feeling much more empowered to go out there and pitch their ideas. They feel more comfortable, starting their own thing and taking that risk on. And people are listening. And so there's even, on the venture side, there's even funds now specifically devoted to women founders. And I think that a lot of that activity is actually happening in biotech, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
And a quick plug here. So NewYorkBIO has pulled together a task force to look at equity, diversity, and inclusion issues and how we can move the needle within our ecosystem, i.e. within biotech, life science companies in New York. And so we're in the process of pulling together a whole cross section of the industry, and looking at what are the buckets which we can move the needle. Is it supporting entrepreneurs? Is it increased funding? Is it STEM education where it's lacking? Like, how do we help create and then the last piece, which I think can't be understated, is increasing equity in access to healthcare, whether it's clinical trials or whether it's actual treatments, but looking at where we can help.
No, I think we have to do both. It has to start from top, bottom, and to be honest with you, not only increase, I mean, for the venture world, increase women partners or LPs that could give bigger funds to women. So there's a lot of women that started VC funds, but their fund size are a lot smaller. And that's, that's saying, it's saying a lot. So we need to change it from all the topics. Same for pharma. I think pharma executives have to start realizing, like, look around who you have right next to you. And when there's not a single woman, that means there's something wrong. Diversity, inclusion, gender parity is extremely important. And it's an urgent need for every single industry. And for us, again, even for like Jennifer said, clinical trials, if we do not have the right diversity, if we have a breast cancer drug and it's not being tested in women, how are we going to know if it actually works? So, same thing with COVID. COVID has been hitting minorities and people of color the hardest. And when, FDA started realizing that no minorities were any of the clinical trials, like, so do you think it's going to be a red flag? Like, how do we know any Latino or any African American is not going to suffer if it was not tested? The drug was not tested on them, on their population. So it's a huge urgent need for everybody to kind of like talk about it and not be scared to talk about it and take that hashtag for gender parity, to be honest with you, to make sure that you have a good percentage. My company, maybe because I'm a woman, there's more women in my company because we end up always having more women apply to the positions when they're open because of they have a women CEO. So it's something that, it's interesting. It's probably social, but it's important that everybody, if you don't have a women CEO, then make a difference, recruit different pools, make different, different metrics, get out of your comfort zone and try different ways to recruit people. And that will make a big difference moving forward.
I think
so,
you.
I was going to throw in what I hope is a softball. So both of you obviously are New York companies. Any trouble recruiting writ large for workers to be in New York, or are people finding that a good life space now for life sciences?
I think people in New York City, because the ecosystem has changed and there's so many cool startups, they're starting to realize that startups are cool and they're a good place to do science. So I'm hoping that the trend continues. So I think it's getting easier to convince that we have how many institutions in New York City? Some of the best institutions. Yeah, I will say 9, 10, including Cold Spring Harbor. So we have some of the best people, and those students who are leaving to go to other biotechs and life science companies. So I think we're trying to do a better job of keeping some of that for us. So that's one. Two, I think because we're working from home, or at least we're computational, so I think it's been easier to recruit because COVID times, you have to change, and we all work from home nowadays. So I think it's been a little bit easier if you have a really good culture that it's a digital culture. I think that's helping for recruitment as well. But it's always, I think it's not that easy. Not knowing somebody, all the HR goes through Zoom. It's interesting dynamics. I don't know what Melanie will have to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, we startups are cool, and New York is cool. But yeah, we've been able to successfully recruit and grow the team. So that's been really validating. I do think that, COVID has certainly changed the city, but I think it's also changed people's perspectives, and specifically as it relates to what they want to do in their career, right? I know a lot of people who left their jobs, even with the uncertainty of what's going on, because they wanted to pivot to do something that they really felt passionate about, or that they, with a mission that resonated with them. And so I think when it comes to biotech and healthcare, a lot of great talent are now saying, you know what, I think I want to do something impactful and do something good in the world. And that's been very helpful. As we've recruited at Tomorrow, people realize the impact that we can make. It's just been almost even more important than the location. And I think to Maria's point, every company has had to figure out how to become digital. And thankfully, many of us, were already digital in many ways. And it was just about making sure we, keep the magic and that connection with the team. But I think New York will continue to be a really interesting place. And certainly there's amazing pools of talent in New Jersey, northern Westchester and Long Island, and you can tap into all of these great people. So I'm optimistic.
Yeah, I think we echo all of that. We've spent a lot of time talking about leadership and about what it takes to build a company, and certainly both of you are dynamic leaders that really I think anybody would be lucky to work for. And we're really excited about what you guys are doing and about all the progress that you made. And I just wanted to thank both of you for joining us today. This has been fantastic. And like you said, we have, we're really, really lucky. We have no shortage of great companies and great people in New York. And I just want to thank both of you for spending time with us this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Jennifer.
All right, thanks, guys. Thanks so much, and have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
You too.
Okay.
Thank you for tuning in to NewYorkBIO's virtual breakfast series. Join us every Tuesday at 9 a.m. for more discussions with leaders from across the healthcare spectrum. For more information on NewYorkBIO, please visit us at www.newyorkbio.org.